Well, I don't know about you guys, but that intro music is intermittent on my speaker. I hope it's well for you. Good morning to Law and Legitimacy. It's Norman Mike. We're back. It's Tuesday, and it's not yet, so don't wish your life away. Embrace the moment. I did. Yesterday I wandered back into what's called a Part B, or a low-level criminal court in New Haven. I hadn't been in one in several years. The combination of the Alex Jones trial and the Proud Boys trial and a few other cases had kept me away from the flotsam and jetsam of the criminal practice. And so yesterday I'm in court, and we got a new case that came in Friday. My office manager assigns me to go to court, and I'm like, wow, it's like high school reunion. Hadn't seen some of these guys in 3-4 years. How you been? Blah 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 blah. I look at my file. Then the fellow has been in and out of trouble his entire adult life. He's in his mid-40s, a lot of burglaries, a lot of robberies. And that's usually a pretty good sign that somebody's got some substance abuse issues. And go into chambers, and the fellow's incarcerated right now. And while out, a home improvement contractor took a contract to do work at someone's house, and he subbed out some of the work to somebody who subbed it out to the third person. So the third sub was my client. He finds himself in a home, and that home suddenly found itself missing, bunch of jewelry and other valuables, which mysteriously turned up in a pawn shop, and the pawn shop serendipitously identified somebody who just happened to look like my client. So this is a case. This is what's known as trouble, and the judge understands that this fellow's got some problems, and so he offers him a relatively long sentence, but concurrent. That is, to serve with other sentences that he's serving. So I'm thinking, why am I even here? I mean, a public defender could have done this. So I go down and talk to the guy, and I understand that he wants a little bit better than what the judge can offer, and I know the reasons for it, which I don't want to betray here and violate the privilege. So I go back up to court, and I say, you need to make me a better offer if this case is going to go away. And the judge is laughing, and why? So I tell the judge, and we start chuckling. He says, I'm not doing it. This is a good offer. And I looked at him, and out of nowhere, I said, Judge, you're only doing this. Now, mind you, there's 6 or 7 people in the room. We're all white, as it would happen. I said, you're only doing this to my client because he's white. And the judge looked at me. I said, what are you talking about? He says, what are you talking about? I said, if my client were black, you'd be offering a better offer because of systemic racism and the manner in which our society has worked against him on every dimension to assure that he fails and that he goes from the school to prison pipeline, and that we keep him incarcerated as part of mass incarceration. You're only punishing my guy because he's white, and you're holding him against higher standards than you'd hold another similarly situated defendant. And so it occurred to me that I was pleading about the harsh bigotry of realistic expectations. If we're going to reform the criminal justice system, if we're going to say that some people should deserve better breaks because of the irregularities and harshness of their lives, then let that lower standard apply to all of us. And, just because my guy's white, he shouldn't be punished more for engaging in the same behavior that somebody else did. So I'll let you know how that works out over time. I think that people were just sort of shocked by the presentation. I kind of liked it, and I give it to you. Plea bargaining is one of the dirty secrets of the criminal justice system, and it's not something that gets talked about enough. And the reason for that is it usually takes place in private. In state court systems, there are often private pretrial proceedings in judicial chambers or between defense counsel and prosecutors that are conducted behind closed doors, and the public has no right to attend these proceedings. And I've wondered about that from time to time. Federal courts, by contrast, the judges do not engage in supervised pretrials. The parties may, and then the judge has to approve explicitly the terms of the deal on the record. But in many state court proceedings, the hard work of justice gets done in darkness, behind closed doors. And notwithstanding the First Amendment's right of access to the courtroom, a right that is founded or grounded in a sense that transparency promotes confidence in the criminal justice system, plea bargaining is a dark and opaque process. I'm not sure the public's, but I'm not sure the public's well served by that. In Connecticut, for example, you can go into a high court or even a low court, and the difference between high and low court being the amount of time a person faces if they're convicted. And you'll see the judge go through his calendar, bing, 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 and the lawyers look, wow, they've got their stuff together. How did they do all this? They did all that behind closed doors. And what you're seeing on the record is the perfected performance. You're not seeing how all those sausages got made. So, a funny story about plea bargaining. Once you've practiced for 10, 15, 20 years, you get a pretty good internal sense of what a case is worth on the market in human suffering. And so, when I was coming up as a lawyer, acquiring those 10,000 hours that I now rely on, I would play a game with prosecutors and I would write down the number that I thought was right for a case. And we'd negotiate. And then I'd say, what's your number? I've got mine right here. And they'd show me. And over time, what I found is my sense of what was reasonable on the market for a case almost always corresponded within a year or two to what a prosecutor's sense was. Somehow, just like in the used car business, people get a sense of what a clunker is worth. In the criminal justice system, you can factor in the severity of the crime, the strength of the case, the character of the defendant, the attitude of the victims, and the current political climate of the community. And those five variables will largely inform a sense of what a case should be pled to if a plea bargain should be entered.
That's an interesting spin on the plea bargain concept, right? The used car market. I mean, I think you would want to, as a practitioner, if you're going to stand on a plea bargain, you'd want to ensure some level of resale value, right?
Yeah.
Look like years in the future, retrospectively, and that's not I don't think that's an imperfect way to look at the push away from prosecution of violent crime and stuff like that we're seeing in major metropolitan areas. I don't know that history is going to look back with any real value for those decisions, right?
Well, I think and the used car lot analogy plays out in another way because often clients do not want to. No, Justin, it's not a murder case. This was not a murder case. It's something about stolen items by a contractor, and there are other murder cases that I've taken in recently, but Justin, we're not talking about those yet. We can talk about plea bargaining murder later. I'm just looking at the comments that are acquiring here, and we've got a lot of them today.
Yeah, we've got one from lawyer Will as well. Is it true that prosecutors overcharge defendants so they can use weak charges as bargaining chips in the plea bargain process?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think that
this ties into the last best offer under seal, because you've talked a lot about this and you're in favor of this concept of last best offer under seal, and I'll let you describe that, but I think those two things are connected, Will.
But before, I still want folks to understand the informal character of the plea bargaining and the reality, the pragmatic reality of what goes on in this case between a lawyer and counsel. So, if you hire a lawyer and you've been charged with a crime, forget about whether you did it or not. You want the best possible outcome. I mean, a smoker who goes hacking his way into a doctor's office to be told he's got lung cancer doesn't say to the doctor, all right, I guess I'm going to die, make it painless. He wants to get better. And so same of a person accused of a crime. They come to a criminal defense lawyer and they want a miracle. They want you to be able to persuade the world it never happened. It was some other guy. They were in Deep Space Nine. Xenon did it. Their ex-wife did it, inhabiting them through the body double of her new lover who was trying to extinguish my career prospects in the world so that they could take my baby, my house, and my life savings. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy rationales that go on. But until often a lawyer and client are at loggerheads and the client's like, that's the best you can do. And you finally say to them, is when the plea bargaining process comes to an end and you've got the best deal you can, you say, look, life is like a used car lot. You don't, but plea bargaining may not be, because this isn't a case where we go needing a car and decide which one to drive. And if we don't like any of them, we just leave without a car.
Must leave with a car.
Yeah, no. Well, in this case, plea bargaining isn't like a used car lot. Plea bargaining is like a train track. You are tied to the train track. That distant rumbling you hear, that's the locomotive coming. And as we get closer to the end of the case and the ground begins to shake, that's the locomotive a little crazier. And that wheel screaming, hollering, that's warning you to get yourself off the track. My job as your criminal defense lawyer is to get as much of you off the track in one piece as I possibly can. Sometimes you got to give a leg to live a life. And so plea bargaining gets very ugly. This concept of the last best offer, you may have heard of the trial tax. Plea bargaining is supposed to represent justice. In other words, the state and the defendant assess the strengths and weaknesses of their case and arrive at a compromise with which they both can live. To lawyer Will's point, a prosecutor may charge high and offer to plead low, but if a client doesn't want to plead, those high charges still go to trial, and the client may be convicted of that. And the conviction numbers after conviction, a sentence after conviction is invariably higher than the plea offer, even though the sentencing judge isn't supposed to know the plea offer. And so, prosecutors and some judges will say plea bargaining represents a discount off the foreseeable consequences of a trial. My perspective is that the trial tax represents the imposition of a duty on a person who chooses to exercise their right to go to trial, and it's wrong. If it was justice to offer my client X years for Y crime prior to trial, it is unjust to ask for Y plus 10 for the same crime after trial.
And
that's
for those
imposing
that
a
might
tax.
argue, and for those that might argue, well, it's different because the judicial process has to be put forth. There's value in that. That's what every criminal defendant is entitled to as a matter of right. So you can't be, theoretically, you shouldn't be charged, to your point, for taking the government to task and holding them to their obligation.
Oh, Justin doesn't approve of my lame attempt at humor here. He says, leave this material home Thursday night. Okay, Justin, just make sure that you come Thursday night. I need to have at least 4 people turn up at Mohegan Sun at 10 o'clock on Thursday night in order to win the stage. I don't, and so unless I get at least 4 people to turn up and say at the stands they've come to see me, I may not be able to perform at all. But that's life. Hey, listen, did you know there's a new study out about environmental DNA?
Cindy on Rumble says, please don't call President Biden a meat sack today. I'm grilling ribeyes tonight. And every time you say that, I lose my appetite for beef.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, it is a jarring image. I mean, take a look at the title on this article. Your DNA can now be pulled from thin air, privacy experts are worried.
I'm not even sure what you just said to me.
Your DNA can now be pulled from thin air, privacy experts are worried. Environmental researchers trying to track wildlife have begun to notice the following. Let's suppose you're in the area of a beaver dam, and you want to see whether a particular beaver is associated with a hut. You may or may not have DNA samples that you can get that will help you track the animal. What researchers have noticed in recent years, as their technology has improved, they've been able to detect ambient human DNA in fields through which people have walked. Think about that for a moment. You may be shedding ambient, that is airborne, human DNA as you walk through a field and be leaving a detectable genetic footprint that makes your whereabouts findable by a forensic scientist. Why does this matter? Well, consider transfer DNA. At any given moment on your skin, you have epithelial or skin cells, and you shed DNA throughout the day. It is possible that if you shake hands with a stranger today, some of your ambient DNA will go from your hand onto that stranger's hand. Suppose that stranger then touches a third item, like a pen, in a bank while writing a demand note for money in a bank robbery. Some of your transfer DNA can find its way from that pen or from the hand of that third person to the pen and make it appear as though you had touched that pen. That's a troublesome example that I am often using in cases involving touch DNA. That's what that's called, to illustrate to jurors that just because a person's DNA is present doesn't mean they've been. But now we apparently have such powerful DNA testing material that merely walking through a field can detect that you yourself had walked through it, or at least somebody with your DNA had walked through it. So keep an eye on it.
Are you making a prediction about the Koberger case, Norm?
I don't know. I mean, I suspect that in the Koberger case, there will be very powerful DNA evidence, and there is that we're aware of. I'm not sure they need ambient DNA in a field, but maybe.
Seems ridiculous. I always like just putting these general searches into the search bar and seeing what happens and looking at the domain names of who's producing. So this is all coming, all the top hits here from iHeart.com. So I'm assuming the radio station from various outlets all over the country. But, it's basically a copy and paste job on this stuff. So color me a little bit skeptical that there isn't a more diverse coverage of this story that ranks higher.
Well, the story I'm relying on was in the New York Times on the 15th. I guess that was yesterday. So,
so it's going to be a little further down here, 12 hours ago, right?
Right.
But I'd be interested to, just to compare how the New York Times, I guess, basically copy and pasted the 30-something iHeart articles and did its own independent fact check. So we'll see.
Hey, so tell me about Elon and Linda Yaccarino. I guess she got the job.
Yeah, she did. And, I was absolutely wrong in my prediction that wouldn't be the case. However, the reports, whatever those reports were, the sources that we'll never know, were confirmed true when Elon, very shortly after our stream on Friday, Norm, I think he tweeted it, before noon. We finished around, 8:30, 8:45 on Friday, maybe a bit later. And it was just several hours later that he quote tweeted the one that I showed on the stream, where he, used the she pronoun that she would be introduced within the next 6 months, and then said that he was glad to welcome Linda Yaccarino as the new CEO. And he also advertised that as soon as she was ready, that they would do a Twitter Spaces together and answer any questions that people had.
Has Elon responded at all to any concerns that her association with the World Economic Forum might augur ill for Twitter and its commitment to transparency and openness?
Directly, I don't believe so, but I think that is the whole point of him advertising the Twitter Spaces. And I think that the political right would do well to sit tight and to not lose its mind on this issue. I view this in the larger context of everything else that we're seeing right now. Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson together wield an immense amount of power, political influence, intellectual influence. And we're talking about, from the philosophical side of things and the political side of things and the Tucker stuff, just general governance principles. And then you can think of Elon within the technological innovation sphere, space travel, the future of humanity. He has his own thoughts about artificial intelligence, generative AI, as well as what he calls Neuralink. And we've known for a while that Twitter is now known as X Corp. And his desire is to make Twitter, I guess, the X app over time. And it's the everything app. I don't know how Linda folds into this, but I'm reminded that someone as impressive as Vivek Ramaswamy was also affiliated in some way with the World Economic Forum. I think that we're doing ourselves a massive disservice. And I know that this sounds really fanboy to Elon, and I'll own that. I want Elon to succeed. And I think
what do you call Elon Musk meeting Ye at a singles bar? If you're Mike Boyer, a dream date, because you like Ye too.
I do. I think the world of Ye, and I think quite a lot of Elon. I don't think that Elon is as impressive as Ye, but that's a conversation for another time. But I do think that Elon wields a lot, and I think about the Machiavelli stuff that we discussed in The Prince, right? And how one invades a foreign territory and how one ingratiates him or herself to the native population. And I think that if we look at America as a battleground for power and regime play and change, frankly, right now, I don't think that there's any question that America is in the midst of perhaps its most prescient and salient power struggle in its history, right? Where we're seeing the deep state, as it's referred to via the acronyms FBI, CIA, NHS, et cetera, be outed for very specious investigations of our commander, or what became our commander in chief. I think that no matter what, there are imperfect hands on the levers of power, and those who can envision a future for themselves and individual sovereignty should think critically about who poses, I guess, the best opportunity at a future that looks and feels the most like the American Constitution and the American Republic. Right now, my bet is on Elon and any affiliation that he can forge with the likes of Tucker Carlson, the likes of Ye, and even if it's Linda Yaccarino, who comes from decades of experience in these worlds. We'll see what happens with the
I don't
notion.
know. I mean, I hear you. I have alarm bells going off about Yacarino. It's not that
And everyone
I,
does.
I don't know
Everyone
that
does.
I know enough about her, and so I'll keep an open mind. I would like to see Tucker emerge. I mean, it's been a while, and there's been some discussions about, when he's going to surface. I gather that negotiations between his counsel and Fox are heated right now. Otherwise, we would know more. Tucker's not known to be reticent. Hey, let's pivot real quick to the FBI and John Durham's report. It was released last night at 4 o'clock. Report on matters related to intelligence activities and investigations arising out of the 2016 presidential campaigns, it's titled. He delivered it to Merrick Garland apparently last Friday, and it wasn't released, as I said, until 4 o'clock yesterday. John Durham, I know John Durham personally. He is a former U.S. attorney in Connecticut. He was head of the office for a while. I had Durham testify for me once in a case, and the jury loved him. And what people know about Durham is that he is a no-nonsense prosecutor, a hard-hitting prosecutor. Funny story about John Durham. I once had a case where one of my clients, a police officer in this instance, was retaliated against by his local police department for working with the FBI on an investigation of some other cops. And I had Durham come in to testify, and I'd ask him simple questions, and he'd go on and on and on. And he warmed to the task such that it almost became humorous. At one point I had to find a way to stop him, and I said, John, you've been answering this last question for about 7 minutes. Can I get another question in? But there's one other point I need to make. And he kept going on. So I haven't had a chance to read through his entire 300-some page report. I've got it right here.
308 pages, I think. So
But I mean, the bottom line, at least as reported, and I've seen enough to see that this is true, is he's critical of the FBI for double standards. They seem to be a little too willing to believe the worst about Trump and launch full investigations, or at least impressive investigations as to Trump, about claims that Trump had been the beneficiary of foreign influence, and a little less inclined to investigate when Democrats like Hillary were deemed to have been the beneficiaries of foreign influence. Now, in Durham's case, he three times he launched prosecutions against federal officials for their inappropriate involvement in the election of 2016. In two of those cases, jurors quickly acquitted. Of course, those were D.C. juries. And my impression of a D.C. jury is if they hear the name Trump, they know what their verdict is before they know what they're being asked to decide. In a third case, an individual entered into a plea bargain and pled guilty before going to trial. Probably regrets it now, seeing what happened to the other defendants. But and in the Durham report, once again, there are questions raised about the FBI's reliance on confidential human sources. You see our teaser headline: CHS, CHS, CHS. It seems like almost weekly now we get another revelation about CHSs in Congress. CHS. CHS, our confidential human sources informants, played a great role in the Proud Boys case. I've talked to you about that before, and about the hearings we had under seal in the middle of a public trial to make sure that we defense lawyers don't say too much about the manner and means by which the FBI does its business. We saw this come up again with the FBI refusing to turn over CHSs regarding Hunter Biden. We now see the use of CHSs in questionable proceedings as related to Donald Trump in the 2016 presidential election. When is Congress going to wake up? Jim Jordan, when are you going to wake up and hold a hearing in particular on CHSs? You can find out who is responsible for the unit developing policies and programs, and who is responsible for administering those policies and programs as to CHSs, and subpoena him to Congress, subpoena him or her to Congress, and to bring together with him a list of the policies themselves, internal memoranda that reflect how those policies are administered, and more to the point, a list of active CHSs divided by programs or are targets of their investigation. It may be that the public doesn't get to know all of that. There may be valid security or national security reasons to keep this out of the news media. I think that the FBI should be made to sing for its supper in that regard. But the FBI has zero excuses for not being accountable, or it has no excuse to be unaccountable to Congress in this regard. And we're seeing enough about confidential human sources on a weekly basis now that at least two citizens in this republic, Mike and I, are demanding answers.
Absolutely. I want to read one thing, well, a couple of things, but on page 297 of the report, there's a subheading, subheading number 5, and it's called Interaction with the Trump Campaign. And I bring this up because of the CHS involvement and what you were just discussing. So it's a couple of paragraphs here. It's very short. Quote, on August 11th, 2016, the FBI met with CHS-1, who, as described earlier, was a long-standing FBI source. CHS-1 had decided not to join the Trump campaign, but told the FBI that he/she was willing to refrain from notifying the campaign about this decision. The Crossfire Hurricane investigators were pleased or relieved that the source did not want to join the campaign. But as to whether the FBI encouraged or directed the source to avoid notifying the campaign, the OIG review is less clear. Not notifying the campaign, of course, could in and of itself affect the campaign's staffing decisions or other activities. On September 1st, 2016, CHS-1 met with a high-level Trump campaign official who is not a subject of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. This meeting was consensually monitored. The OIG notes that, quote, FBI and department policy did not require that the FBI obtain department approval to consensually monitor this conversation. Also in September 2016, CHS-1 met with Papadopoulos. The OIG review says that, quote, the OGC unit chief told the OIG that because the operation targeted Papadopoulos individually and wasn't directed at anything related to the campaign, she thought it was appropriate, end quote. If the purpose of CHS-1's meeting with Papadopoulos was not to find out if the campaign or anyone on its behalf was conspiring or colluding with Russia, it is hard to know what the purpose was.
So I think breaking that down, we've got the FBI using confidential sources to monitor active presidential campaigns.
And not related to an investigation. I mean, that right there says that it was consensually monitored. They were consensually monitoring a conversation with a high-level campaign official from Trump's team, and it was not subject, apparently, to the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. And they also thought that it wasn't worthy of disclosing that or getting approval from any of the department heads.
Jim Jordan, it's time for you to step up, buddy. Another related story, New York IRS removes whistleblower, entire investigative team on Hunter Biden tax fraud allegations at direction of Attorney General Garland. Again, transparency, equal justice under the law, the sense that when a person errs, it's not who they are that dictates the results of the investigation, but what they've done and what it can be proven that they have done. Refusing to look at someone because of their status is the very definition of selective enforcement of the law. Merrick Garland talks a mean game about prosecutorial integrity and the need to maintain confidence in the rule of law. Merrick, you're blowing it, babe. A lot of questions have come up with respect to Hunter Biden in recent weeks. The FBI, as part of the Justice Department, just refused to turn over information in response to a congressional subpoena, and now you're backing off Hunter? It's a bad look, Merrick, and I think a curious public wants to know what's behind this.
Well, look, I mean, the key here is that Merrick Garland advised Congress, Norm, that the United States attorney overseeing this investigation, based in Delaware, had complete and total sole discretion over charging decisions in this case, and that there would be no retaliatory effort made for the whistleblower's activity. And miraculously, now we have a total removal of the entire team that includes the whistleblower. So the issue here is, are they trying to remove the entire team to avoid a direct confrontation over retaliation against a whistleblower, right? So to say that they didn't do it one-on-one, but instead they remove the entire team that's been working for 3+ years on allegations of tax fraud.
Don't know. It's a bad look.
BTL says they probably learned their lesson. This is in respect to the OIG and FBI. They probably learned their lesson and will never, ever do it again.
Oh yeah. And this the best of all possible worlds. Well, I don't know. I'm looking forward. We'll report more on the results of the Durham report in the days to come. I'd like to read through it all before giving opinions on it. I realize that's shocking to you. We're supposed to just take headlines from elsewhere and comment, but one of the things we're trying to develop is a set of independent standards and a reliable place where you can come for news and commentary on events that is unrelated to the ideological currents that other people are stirring up. So thanks for tuning in on us today. It was kind of a low energy day. I don't know why Mike and I were grousing before the show about that. It just works that way from time to time. The world continues to turn. Sometimes it seems to turn less rapidly than others. Stay tuned. Continue to offer us your support. We appreciate it. Spread the word. We're here. We take your story ideas seriously. If you see something, say something. If you don't want to say it, give it to us. We'll say it for you. And don't forget, May 18th, Mohegan Sun at 10 p.m. at the Comics Club. You might meet Ned, the coffin salesman.
That's right. Well, I think the energy is a skeptical or a suspicious energy that we have this morning. I know that some of our viewers probably wanted a little bit more red meat here regarding the Durham report. But as you said, Norm, it's a 300-page report. It moves through the entire chronology of events leading up to the 2016 probe. I just gave you one small excerpt from an otherwise voluminous report. And if Durham's report here is underwhelming, it is what it is. I don't know that, it's his job to come to these broad conclusions, but we'll continue getting at that. And yeah, I think I like this, the harsh bigotry of realistic expectations. I think I like that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I hope we're not expecting too much, or we're applying a higher standard to Durham because he's white. I mean, maybe if we'd had a black investigator, we would have gotten a more probing result. I don't know,
Perhaps. And Justin Carter says, we'd rather wait for you guys to digest it more. We appreciate that. Certainly, we have our own day jobs and cases to manage, but this is something that we'll continue to kind of piece out and go through as we can. I think tomorrow we'll get into it a little deeper. As always, we thank you. Please put a thumbs up on this video. Tell Rumble to stop playing with our views. And YouTube is just far outpacing Rumble in terms of our growth and engagement. So I have to admit that we got off to a rocky start with YouTube with all these random violations. We haven't had any since, so maybe we're due for 1 or 2 or 3 more. But wherever you come to us, we appreciate you. Please subscribe, please share, and also consider becoming a member on Locals. We're still working on getting some pros up there that'll begin augmenting our presence there. Norm, we'll see you in the morning.
You will.
And if anybody has questions or comments, you can email pattispodcast@gmail.com. Until tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., Norm.
Ciao. See you then.
Bye.